Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're really excited about today's topic. We're going to be diving deep into something that's absolutely crucial for, well, pretty much everything we do when it comes to learning and understanding the world around us.
Definitely. You know, it's interesting. We received some amazing source material that really gets into the nitty-gritty of how we learn and process information. And today we're zeroing in on this one skill that kind of sits at the heart of it all.
Reading comprehension.
That's it.
Reading comprehension.
Exactly. It's like the bedrock. And, you know, think of this as us taking apart that whole process of why some things you read, you're just like, aha, got it. And others, well, it's like trying to swim through mud. We're going to break down what makes the difference.
So we're kind of cracking the code of why some texts click and others not so much.
Yeah.
But we want to make sure that you guys listening can unlock that click more often. The goal here is to really understand what active reading comprehension is, not just skimming words, and why it matters so much if you're trying to learn anything new, whether it's for school, work, or just for fun. And the best part is, we're going to equip you with some practical tools to actually get better at it. We've looked at a ton of stuff, from educational guides to real-world teaching strategies, so we've got a pretty solid, well-rounded view for you.
Absolutely. Your sources really emphasized how true comprehension isn't just about passively looking at words on a page.
Right.
It's about actively making sense of what you're reading. We're talking about building that picture in your mind of what's going on, grasping why characters do what they do, and even anticipating what might happen next. It's a much more dynamic process. So, to kick things off, let's really clarify what we mean by reading comprehension in the first place.
Yeah, let's break it down.
Okay. So, at its core, reading comprehension is about constructing meaning from what you read. It's the ability to not just decode words, but to understand what those words are trying to tell you as a whole.
Right.
It's not just about being able to say, oh, I recognize that word. It's about getting the bigger picture, the meaning, the message behind those words. You have to actively engage your mind with the content, not just skim over it.
So it's not just recognizing the words. It's
Yeah.
about really understanding what the writer's trying to convey, right? And this isn't just for, like, reading novels, right?
Absolutely not.
This is something that matters across the board.
Oh, absolutely. It's foundational to academic success no matter what subject you're tackling. It's essential in math, science, history, you name it.
I see.
If you're grappling with a complex math problem described in words, or trying to wrap your head around a scientific principle explained in a textbook, or even just trying to delve into the intricacies of historical events through written accounts, you're going to need solid reading comprehension to really make sense of it all.
Yeah. So, in a way, it's like the key that unlocks all other learning.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. If you can't comprehend what you're reading, you're going to hit a wall pretty quickly no matter what you're trying to learn.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does good reading comprehension actually, like, help us in those situations?
Well, think of it like the strong reading comprehension gives you the power to not just absorb information, but to actually do something with it. It enables you to think critically about what you're reading, to approach problems more effectively, and to articulate your understanding in a way that's clear and concise.
So it's about going beyond just taking things in. It's about being able to analyze, synthesize, and apply that information.
Absolutely, and it has a ripple effect. When you become a more skilled comprehender, you naturally cultivate a deeper curiosity and a thirst for learning, which can benefit you in your career, your personal life, and just your overall growth as a person. Imagine trying to assemble furniture from those notoriously cryptic instructions, or understanding a complex legal document if you couldn't truly grasp the meaning of the written words.
Right, or even something as simple as understanding a news article.
Exactly. It would be incredibly frustrating and limiting. So yeah, it really is a foundational skill with a far-reaching impact.
And from what I understand, it's not just this one monolithic skill, right?
Right.
It's a combination of different abilities that all work together, kind of like a team.
Exactly. It's a set of interconnected cognitive skills, each playing a vital role in how we extract meaning from text. You can't just rely on one of these. They need to work in harmony.
Like a well-oiled machine.
Precisely. Think of it as different specialists collaborating on a project. They each have their own expertise, but they need to communicate and work together to achieve a common goal.
So what are these key skills?
Well, we're talking about things like being able to identify the main idea, spotting those crucial supporting details, making inferences, which is essentially reading between the lines, understanding vocabulary and context, and being able to follow a sequence of events.
Okay, that sounds like a lot. Let's break those down one by one. Starting with identifying the main idea. What exactly are we looking for when we're trying to find that?
Good question. The main idea, sometimes called the central idea or the gist, is essentially the author's primary point.
Okay.
It's that big overarching thought that ties everything together, that essence the author wants you to take away from the text. Now, often this main idea is stated directly, especially in things like textbooks or articles. You might find it in the first or last sentence of a paragraph, or even in the introduction or conclusion of the whole piece.
So if I'm reading, say, a paragraph about the history of chocolate, the main idea might be something like, chocolate has a rich and fascinating history spanning centuries and continents.
Exactly. It's that central point that everything else in the paragraph elaborates on. It's like the foundation of a house, the trunk of a tree. Everything else branches out from that core idea.
Okay, so we find that central point, that main idea. What's the next step? What else do we need to be paying attention to?
Well, once you've got the main idea, it's time to zoom in on those important
The
details.
supporting details.
Right. Those details provide the evidence, the examples, the explanations that really flesh out and support that main idea. They're crucial for getting a richer, deeper understanding of what you're reading.
So in our chocolate example, the details might be things like where cacao beans were first discovered, how chocolate was used in ancient cultures, or how it evolved into the different types we enjoy today.
Precisely. Those details enrich the story and add depth to our understanding of chocolate's journey. Think of it like building a house. The main idea is the blueprint, and those supporting details are the bricks, the beams, the windows, and everything else that brings the blueprint to life.
Okay, that makes sense. So we have the main idea and all the supporting details, but now we need to talk about this idea of making inferences, or reading between the lines. This sounds like it requires a little detective work.
Absolutely. Making inferences is like putting on your detective hat. It's about using the information that is explicitly stated in the text, along with your own background knowledge, to figure out what the author is implying but not directly saying.
Okay, so it's like the author is giving us clues, and we have to piece them together using what we already know about the world.
Exactly. You're looking for those subtle hints and cues, and then using your reasoning skills to draw conclusions that aren't explicitly spelled out. It's about understanding the unspoken language of the writing.
Right, like understanding the subtext.
Yes. And it's a crucial skill for really grasping the nuances and deeper meanings of a text.
Can you give us a concrete example of what that might look like?
Sure, imagine a story where a character constantly fidgets, avoids eye contact, and speaks in short clip sentences. The author might not explicitly say, "This character is nervous," but by observing those subtle behaviors and using our understanding of body language, we can infer that the character is likely feeling anxious or uneasy.
Okay, so it's about piecing together those subtle clues and using our own knowledge to fill in the gaps.
Exactly. And it makes reading a much more active and engaging process.
Now, what happens when we bump into a word we've never seen before? That can really throw a wrench in our understanding.
Oh, absolutely. That's where the skill of understanding vocabulary and context, what your sources cleverly call being a word detective, comes into play. It's all about using the surrounding words and sentences, those context clues, to figure out the meaning of an unfamiliar word.
So we're not just frantically flipping through a dictionary every time we hit a roadblock.
Not necessarily, no.
Oh.
Authors often provide helpful clues right there in the text, either through synonyms, antonyms, examples, or just the overall sense of the passage.
So if I read a sentence like, "The intrepid explorer ventured into the uncharted wilderness," even if I've never encountered the word intrepid before, I can use the context of an explorer going into the wilderness to infer that it probably means brave or fearless.
Precisely. You've used those surrounding words to crack the code and figure out the meaning.
I like that, cracking the code. So we're really building up our toolkit here. We're finding the main idea, we're picking out those important details, we're making inferences, and we're deciphering unfamiliar words. What's the last key piece in this comprehension puzzle?
The final key piece is the ability to follow the sequence of events, or understanding the order in which things happen. This is especially important when you're reading stories or instructions where that order is crucial for understanding the plot or following the steps correctly.
Okay, so it's about being able to track how things unfold in a chronological order.
Exactly. And there are often little signposts, certain words and phrases that authors use to guide us through that sequence.
Like what?
Words like first, then, next, afterward, finally. These signal to the reader that there's a specific order to the events.
They're like the mile markers on a road trip.
Exactly. They help you stay oriented and understand the progression of the story or instructions.
So we've laid out all these core skills that make up strong reading comprehension. But now comes the real challenge. How do we actually improve these skills? How do we become better, more active readers?
It all boils down to consistent practice and using effective strategies. One of the most fundamental things you can do is simply make reading a regular habit.
So it's like exercise, but for our brains.
Absolutely. Just like physical exercise strengthens your body, regular reading strengthens your comprehension muscles. Even just 15-20 minutes a day can make a huge difference in your ability to understand and process information.
And it shouldn't feel like a chore, right? I
Right.
mean, the key is to find things that you actually enjoy reading.
That's so important. Find books, articles, blogs, anything that sparks your curiosity and makes you want to keep turning those pages. When you're genuinely interested in the topic, you're naturally more engaged and more likely to really absorb and understand the information.
Right. It's not about forcing yourself to read something you find boring.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot where learning and enjoyment intersect.
Now, another strategy you mentioned was the power of asking questions as we read. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Absolutely. It's about turning reading into an active dialogue rather than a passive activity. Don't just let the words wash over you. Instead, actively engage with the text by constantly asking yourself questions like, what's the main point here? Why did the character do that? What evidence does the author provide to support this claim? Or how does this relate to what I already know?
So it's like having a conversation with the author in your head.
Exactly. Asking questions keeps your mind sharp and forces you to dig deeper into the meaning of the text.
And it also helps us stay focused,
Yeah.
right? If we're constantly asking ourselves questions, we're less likely to zone out or get distracted.
Exactly. It's a great way to keep your mind engaged and make sure you're really processing the information.
Okay, so we've got regular reading and active questioning. What was that third key strategy you mentioned?
That would be the power of summarizing.
Okay.
After you've read a section or a whole article, take a moment to mentally recap the main points in your own words. This forces you to identify the core ideas, the key details, and really solidify your understanding. If you can explain it to yourself in a concise way, that's a good sign that you've truly grasped the material.
It's like checking in with yourself to make sure you're on the right track.
Exactly. It's a great way to monitor your comprehension and ensure you're not just skimming the surface.
So we have consistent reading, active questioning, and regular summarizing, three powerful tools for becoming better comprehenders. Now, while it's easy to see how reading comprehension is crucial for school and learning, your sources also highlighted how important it is for everyday life, even outside of the classroom.
Absolutely. It's a fundamental life skill that we use constantly, often without even realizing it.
Like how?
Well, think about it. Reading and understanding text messages from friends, deciphering instructions for assembling that new gadget you just bought, following a recipe, understanding the terms and conditions of a website. All of these everyday tasks require solid reading comprehension.
Right. It's not just about textbooks and academic papers.
Exactly. It's about being able to navigate the world around us effectively. And strong reading comprehension is also closely tied to effective communication, both written and spoken.
And of course, it's essential in specific areas of study, right?
Absolutely. Let's take math, for example. You need to be able to accurately comprehend word problems to even begin solving them. In science, understanding the procedures and results outlined in research articles is crucial. And in history, interpreting primary and secondary sources is key to grasping the nuances of past events.
So really, reading comprehension is woven into the fabric of how we learn and interact with the world.
Absolutely. It's a foundational skill that impacts our ability to function effectively in so many different contexts.
Okay, so we've established that reading comprehension is incredibly important. But let's be real. There are times when understanding what we read feels like pulling teeth. What are some of the common culprits behind these comprehension struggles?
Oh, there are definitely a few usual suspects. One big one is encountering unfamiliar vocabulary. If a text is riddled with words you don't know, it can make it really difficult to get the overall meaning.
Yeah, it's like trying to read a book in a foreign language.
Exactly. It can feel really overwhelming. Similarly, if the topic itself is completely new to you, it can be hard to make sense of the information. And if a text is packed with tons of details, it can be hard to keep track of everything and extract the main points. Writing styles that are indirect or rely heavily on implied meanings can also pose a challenge.
And sometimes it's just plain old lack of interest, right?
Absolutely.
If you're not engaged in the material, it's much harder to focus and really understand what you're reading.
Absolutely. Your sources emphasize that motivation and interest play a huge role in how well we comprehend.
Now, you mentioned earlier this idea of reading between the lines, making inferences. Can we revisit that a bit? I think that's one of the trickier aspects of comprehension for many people.
Definitely. Reading between the lines essentially boils down to using your reasoning skills to understand what the author is suggesting, but not directly stating.
Okay.
It's about recognizing those subtle hints and clues in the text, and then drawing logical conclusions based on what you know about the world.
It's like being a detective, right? You're
Yeah.
looking for clues and using them to piece together the bigger picture.
Exactly. You're using your powers of deduction to figure out the implied meanings.
And what kind of questions should we be asking ourselves as we're reading to really strengthen our inference-making abilities? Your sources had some good suggestions.
Oh, yeah, there are tons of great questions you can ask yourself. Things like, what is the author's tone or attitude in this passage? What can I infer about the character's motivations based on their actions? Or what might happen next based on the events that have already unfolded?
Those are good ones.
Also, always remember the basic who, what, where, when, why, and how questions. Those can be incredibly helpful for dissecting a text and making sure you've grasped the essential elements.
So it's about constantly interrogating the text, digging deeper, and looking for those hidden layers of meaning.
Exactly. The more actively you engage with the text, the more likely you are to uncover those deeper meanings and really make it your own.
Okay, now what about those moments when you're reading something and you're just totally stuck? Like you've reread it a few times, but you still can't grasp the meaning. What are some strategies for dealing with those comprehension roadblocks?
Well, first and foremost, don't panic. It happens to everyone. Sometimes a simple reread can do wonders. Maybe you missed a key detail the first time around, or maybe you just need a fresh perspective. If rereading doesn't do the trick, try breaking the passage down into smaller chunks and focusing on understanding each part before moving on.
So kind of like tackling it piece by piece instead of trying to swallow the whole thing at once.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to look up unfamiliar words. Having a dictionary handy, whether physical or online, can be a lifesaver. If vocabulary is tripping you up, clearing up those definitions can often unlock the meaning of the whole sentence or paragraph.
Right, sometimes one little word can make all the difference.
It absolutely can. And if you're still struggling, try summarizing the passage in your own words. This can help pinpoint the exact areas where you're getting lost. And of course, never hesitate to ask for help. Whether it's a classmate, a teacher, a tutor, or even just a friend or family member, discussing the material with someone else can often provide new insights and clear up confusion.
So it's about being resourceful and using all the tools at your disposal.
Exactly. And remember, it's okay to ask for help. There's no shame in admitting that you don't understand something. In fact, asking for clarification often shows that you're actively engaged and eager to learn.
And one thing that's important to remember is that you don't necessarily need to understand every single word in a text to grasp the main idea, right?
That's a really important point. While a strong vocabulary is undoubtedly helpful, you can often get the gist of a passage even if you encounter a few unfamiliar words. That's where the skill of using context clues comes in handy.
Right. So instead of getting bogged down in every single word, we can try to focus on the overall meaning and use those context clues to fill in the gaps.
Precisely. It's about keeping the bigger picture in mind and not getting lost in the weeds.
Now, one of the really interesting points in your research was how understanding reading comprehension can actually make us better writers. Can you explain that connection a bit?
Oh, absolutely. It makes perfect sense when you think about it. When you have a good grasp of what makes writing clear and easy to understand from a reader's perspective, you can apply those same principles to your own writing to make it more effective.
So it's like being able to see both sides of the coin, the writer's side and the reader's side.
Exactly. And that understanding can really elevate your writing.
Because in the end, the goal of writing is to communicate clearly, right?
Exactly. You want your readers to understand what you're trying to say without having to struggle or get lost along the way.
So what are some tips for writing with comprehension in mind?
Well, one key strategy is to use clear and concise headings and subheadings. These act as signposts that guide the reader through your writing and make it easier to follow the flow of your ideas.
It's like providing a roadmap.
Exactly. Breaking down complex information into bullet points or numbered lists can also make your writing more digestible and reader-friendly. Opting for simpler language over overly complex jargon can make a huge difference in clarity. And don't underestimate the power of visual aids like images, charts, and graphs. They can often convey information much more effectively than words alone.
It's all about making it easy for the reader to understand and absorb the information.
Absolutely. Organizing your ideas logically with a clear introduction, well-developed body paragraphs, and a concluding summary also helps guide the reader and ensure they can follow your train of thought. And using transition words and phrases to connect your ideas creates a smooth and coherent flow, making your writing much more enjoyable to read.
So by understanding the principles of good comprehension, we become better writers ourselves.
Exactly, it's all connected.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. To help tie everything together, can we do a quick review of those key comprehension skills you mentioned earlier?
Absolutely. So to recap, the essential skills for strong reading comprehension are identifying the main idea, which is about understanding the central message or point the author is making. Recognizing important details, which is about picking out those supporting pieces of information that flesh out the main idea. Making inferences, which is about reading between the lines and drawing conclusions based on implied meanings. Understanding vocabulary and context, which is about being a word detective and using clues in the text to figure out the meaning of unfamiliar words. And finally, sequencing events, which is about understanding the order in which things happen, whether in a story or a set of instructions.
That was a great recap. So we've taken a deep dive into reading comprehension. We've explored what it is, why it matters, the core skills involved, practical strategies for improvement, and even its connection to our own writing.
And hopefully our listeners are now equipped with a better understanding of how to approach reading in a more active and engaged way.
Absolutely. And as a final thought for our listeners, remember this improving your reading comprehension isn't just about passing tests or getting good grades. It's about opening up a whole new world of understanding, empowering yourself to learn more effectively, and becoming a more insightful and engaged participant in the world around you.
It's about realizing that every piece of writing, no matter how simple or complex, holds the potential to teach us something new, challenge our perspectives, and broaden our horizons. So the next time you pick up a book, an article, or even just a social media post, consider how consciously applying even just one of these techniques, perhaps really focusing on identifying the main idea or actively trying to make more inferences, could shift your entire experience and unlock deeper layers of meaning you might have otherwise missed. It's about approaching reading with intention and curiosity and seeing it as an opportunity for growth and discovery.
And that is what the deep dive is all about. Thanks for listening, everyone.
My pleasure.
See you next time.